The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, we'll continue with this with the part where we left yesterday. I think still site is down, guys. Okay, I checked just morning today. Maybe I don't know how many days, how many time it will take. I'll do one thing. अभी जितना वीडियो था वो मैं भेज देता हूँ आप लोगों को. Okay. Meanwhile, जब सब कुछ up होता है, तब we'll see how things will work. तो today I will share things. जितना pending था, मैं आज वो mail में कर दूंगा. And scoop extraction. So first query we are into setup हो गया था अपना JDBC driver we have copied inside the scoop library. कहाँ से download करना है that link I showed you already. Then grant permission देखा था हमने MySQL पे grant क्या करना है, किस IP address को देना है, किस username को देना है. Now we'll start with that scoop argument, and first scoop argument was import. First scoop argument was for import. Yes, Satish. Sure. Let me just complete this part. Yeah. So import, if I start, import means your communication is flowing from RDBMS to HDFS, and do all these things hands-on because reading theory doesn't really make sense here. RDBMS and HDFS. Scoop is 90% practical. In fact, 95% practical. My Cloudera is already open. So we'll verify first where is a JDBC jar for MySQL. Open a terminal. Always do ping, okay? Because I have experienced most of the time what happened. In my case, the IP is not changing, but many people have different IPs every day due to some different network. Okay, let's say you are connecting today with your mobile network, with your Wi-Fi network. Your IP may change, and if you do not give grant permission for the new IP, then your communication will not happen. And then we start struggling again. What is the issue? Though you are doing all the steps right, but only problem is with IP, which you're not checking before running any command. So this is the everyday step I'll recommend you guys. Please open your terminal and type here ifconfig. When you type ifconfig, this is the vmnet 1 address. We have multiple IP address, right? Vmnet 1, vmnet 8. So this IP address you have to check communication using ping command from Cloudera. Okay, since my IP is same, I'm not changing this. Okay, I'm not running ping because I checked this already. So always check this. Maybe you can note somewhere that this is your scoop IP, and whenever you run this command for data extraction, you can match. If IP is same, no need to run. If IP is different, then here also you have to grant a permission in MySQL. Let me open MySQL. Yeah, this MySQL is there in Cloudera also. Okay, same MySQL is available in Cloudera also if I want to extract data from same server to from one server to the same server. I can go inside this, and password is Cloudera here. Okay, now why I'm not telling you this, because this is not we practice in industry. I'm giving you the standard practice which we do, because in industry your one server is not having Cloudera, Hadoop, or RDBMS running in single machine. Obviously you have multiple server. Your one server is in MySQL, having all the data, and second server is running with Hadoop. So we extract data from this server, MySQL server, and you can take any location. Let's say this is in somewhere in US, Ohio, and this is in somewhere Singapore. Hadoop is running or Cloudera is running on Singapore. So this is the actual scenario, because if I practice within the system, then it will be like my data is also there, my Hadoop is also there, and I'm extracting. Command is not different. Command is going to be same command, but flavor will be different. So whenever you answer such question, when we go to project part after learning all this concept, so we will have to say my server was in this location, my Hadoop server was in another location, and using some ETL tool, first FTP protocols we are checking, ICMP protocol we are checking, and once all the protocol is working, then we are extracting data using a tool. And currently this is a scoop, right? I'll tell you Spark SQL also. When we go to Spark, Spark SQL can also bring all the data from MySQL to Hadoop. But we have some limitation in RDBM in Spark SQL. But Spark SQL can do the job way faster than a Scoop, because a Scoop is dependent ultimately on which execution engine. Whatever query you're submitting, it submits that query to MapReduce. Okay, so when you submit this query to MapReduce from Scoop, what is happening internally? That from input to output, that whole step is running of MapReduce for every job of Scoop. So let me take the scenario to understand better. Since I'm doing this import, again, one simple communication flow, RDBMS to HDFS. This is what we want to do using ETL tool. Now, uh, by default, Scoop uses some parameter. So please note this point. By default, Scoop uses some parameter. By default, Scoop says, I will use number of mapper 1. I'll tell you what is number of mapper. By default, right, Satish, exactly. Your understanding is good. By default, Scoop uses 4 mapper and 0 reducer. Because we are not doing any aggregation here. We are extracting the data. Okay. We're extracting the data from one existing server to Hadoop server for data analysis part. So this is point number 1. By default, 4 mapper, which means what do you understand? That this will submit by default any data to 4 CPU. I'll come to the CPU task block when I relate this with a MR workflow or MR input output operation. Second point is, by default, Scoop extracts record. By default, Scoop extracts record from, or let me say by default, Scoop uses target directory in HDFS, which will be this target directory is user Cloudera /user/cloud. This is the directory location where I will append my records. So whatever table name is there in MySQL, okay, that table name will be appended here, and one directory will be created with the same name, and then inside that I will have a data. But what does this mean? This has the complete approach or logic of a scope is based on this concept: number of mapper and number of reducer. Now again, I will write MapReduce flow. So when I write MR flow, and we'll have some question, interactive question. If you're able to answer, please do that. Input, then input is split. This is a standard flow, okay? And you should remember this flow, because if anybody asks you, can you please explain me MR in word and word? or what is the entire flow of MapReduce, what they are doing, what limitations they have. You'll have to remember this, that input is played, then record reader, it reads the record, send it to mapper. Can you see mapper faces coming in MapReduce flow? Then we have a combiner, then we have a partitioner, we have a shuffle short, we have a record writer, we have a reducer. Now you're surprising why I'm again writing MapReduce flow every day, because this is the step when I submit a scoop job, this internal thing will invoke. So let me take one task here to understand the case better. Suppose I want to extract one table from RDBMS, and this is my table, guys. I use this database. I'll say this record. So this is my record, okay? From 6 to 12 rows, and this is RDBMS. Now, can you tell me if this is my record in one server, right? Currently, this is in my host operating system, and suppose this table is having size of 500 MB. I'm taking one rough example. If this record is available in RDBMS, and my task is to extract this data and keep in HDFS for analysis purpose. Now this is the table size, which means this one table dim customer has 500 MB records. So when I run a scoop query, right? When I run a scoop query, how many tasks will be created? If I relate with this MapReduce, because that's what is happening when you submit any query in a scoop, it stores that data in HDFS and it runs that query over MapReduce. So I can say HDFS is a storage and MapReduce is a processing engine or execution engine for scoop. Now the question is very simple again. How many tasks will be created? I'll wait for a minute if you can answer. How many tasks will be created if table size is 500 MB? This is by the way using the same concept of MapReduce. So what we have learned in MapReduce, I'm going to do the same thing again. How many blocks can you tell me? So if you're unable to answer the task, can you tell me how many block it will create? 500 MB file, which is dim customer table in RDBMS. This will create in total. Look, I'm asking this question just to make this session interactive, but if you're not interested, that's okay. I'll not ask any question. Furthermore, uh, 500 MB is my table size, and it is having 128 MB of one block size, 128 MB of another block size, which is 256, right? 128 MB of third block size, which is 384, and last one is having 116 MB. So this is the distribution happens whenever I store data in HDFS by default. So how many tasks will be created? This task is dependent on the table size. Now my table dim customer, has 500 MB data as an assumption. Now This 500 MB data is distributing in 4 blocks, B1, B2, B3, B4, right? B1, B2, B3, B4, which is 128 MB, 128 MB. Thanks, Satish. Yeah, that's right. 116 MB. Total, this is my 500 MB. Now, Scoop is putting a limitation. Scoop says, Scoop is giving one limitation to you. And if you know RDBMS concept, you can connect these things now. So if my table does not have a primary key, obviously in production you do not see any table which does not have a primary key. In production query or in RDBMS, my 99.99% table has a primary key for sure. So if table in RDBMS, and this can be any RDBMS. Okay, as a matter of fact, this can be Oracle, this can be MySQL, this can be SQL, DB2. So if table in RDBMS does not have primary key, I'll refer it as PK, primary key. Okay, then number of mapper can not be multiple, cannot be multiple. Let's read again. If table in RDBMS does not have primary key, okay, presents in the table, the number of mapper cannot be multiple. It has to be just one. Now, before going to scoop mapper concept, why this is not multiple, can we go through and understand basic behavior of primary key? What is the use of primary key? Why do we define primary key? So primary key, first, I'm creating primary key because I want to avoid any duplicacy, right? So this will provide me unique identifier, unique features, right? This will provide me unique features for the column which I'm defining as a primary key. So when there is a duplicacy, there is no duplicacy, which means my record can be stored well in a organic form. So it allows you the unique values only. Internally, it is built with a unique identifiers. Okay, that's one. Second point, it does not accept any null values. Right? If it is a primary key, it does not accept any null value. Then third, obviously we know RDBMS is a row-wise searching. Okay, this is very important to know today, that what is the difference between SQL and NoSQL, because as we go forward in this Hadoop part or module, we'll learn Cassandra or HBase. Okay, so they work with a NoSQL concept, and today NoSQL is challenging SQL in many forms. Okay, their latency of data is very low. They can handle literally real time of data. This is also handling the transaction data, but again RDBMS is very rebellious. It says only I can understand the data which are structured. If data is unstructured, semi-structured, it cannot understand, especially the data which are in terabyte. Only I can store data till gigabyte. So whenever I talk about this big data, always remember, if you say I have 10 GB of data per month or 20 GB of data per month, then it doesn't make sense to work with the Hadoop, right? You can work with the Java programming and RDBMS also. Big data, I'm not giving any number that data which are beyond terabyte, then only it is big data. But when you're using this term, that data itself is high, massive, humongous, and big, then volume should be at least 10 terabyte. Gigabyte volume I can handle in RDBMS also. if you know the limitation of RDBMS. But third point of primary key is very important. Okay, and this is not written in book anywhere, that when I have primary key in my table, okay, what it says internally it gives me lower value, lower bound, I can say, lower bound and upper bound. This is how we read technically, or I can say lower value and upper value or higher value. Can I go back to my table and see if I consider dim customer is my table in RDBMS, so which one is the lowest value and which one is the highest value? If I have primary key, let's say, currently I don't know whether I have a primary key in this table or not, but suppose I have a primary key. Okay, so this is my minimum date record 6, and this is my maximum record 12. This is what your primary key defines you. You can put down your question, Swapnil. Okay, that this is the question. So once this explanation part is done, I will unmute you. Then we can discuss. You can just put a query from your end. I'll unmute you then from my end after explanation of this particular part. Now, what primary key is doing? Primary key is giving me lower value and upper value. Okay, so let's see first what is the lower value and upper value. Before going to this logical part, let me take one real-time example. Okay, suppose I have a 10 task with me. Okay, I have a 10 task with me, and I want to divide this between you guys. I want to divide this task between person 1, person 2, person 3. Okay, now since I have a 10 task, okay, and I know I have total 3 resources to work with this task, what I'll do, I'll divide 3, 3, 4. Obviously, this is an even number, and I have 3 people, so I cannot get the equal distribution, right? I cannot say 3.333 I'll give. So just putting a logical explanation, I'm saying I will give 3 tasks to P1, 3 tasks to P2, and 1 more task to P3. This is how I distribute to P1, P2, P3. But question is, suppose I don't know how many tasks I have. Suppose I do not know, I don't know how many tasks is with me. Okay. So how can I divide to you people? If this is not known to me, how many tasks I have, 30 tasks, 40 tasks, 50 tasks, then how can I divide between my resources? Very simple question. If I don't know this task number, I cannot distribute equally first of all. So in order to divide this job equally, what I need to do first, मेरे पास काम कितना है? I need to know how many tasks I have with me, then only I can define. The same metaphor I'll be using right here in this primary key. This is exactly saying the same thing to you. If your table does not know, how many values are there to distribute among your CPU, because all your processing is happening in this core processing unit. If this number is not known, guys, how can you divide between CPU? Suppose you have two CPU, multi-core processor, right? So if you have two CPU, you'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7 records will go, 3 records will go to one CPU, and 4 records will go to another CPU, just to work with the parallelization concept and to get your output as early as possible. So you need to map this to CPU. If you know the task, this is what your primary key is telling you. Primary key is there present in the table, then you know the lower bound and upper bound, If there is no primary key, then you will have to send this whole data to one CPU, which means one task. Okay, I'll show you this query. When I submit a scoop part, I will show you what is the lower bound and upper bound, all these things, when I have a primary key. So let's take first example, and unintentionally I will make a mistake. I will do one thing. I will create the table. So I have mini table already in my MySQL space. I have a table which does not have any primary key. And then I will try to use a number of mapper. Then we'll see what issue I'm getting there. So let me run this query and then I'll see your questions, guys. You can put down meanwhile if you have any question, so that quickly we can discuss. Now, what I want to do, I want to bring the data from this system to another system, and let me see first description. Describe is dim customer. If I describe this, I'll see do we have any primary key. So we have primary key in this table, but I want table which does not have a primary key. And let me take any table. Let me take ACC, or maybe let me take let me see ACC. Do we have any result in this? So ACC has ID and salary, and what is the description of it? ID and salary, one is integer and another one is double, and there is no primary key. Okay, so I'm assuming internally that I don't know how many task is there with me. I don't know how many task is there with me. Okay, and since I don't know how many task is there with me, the first point is uh, the first point is applicable, that number of mapper cannot be multiple, which means I will define hyphen m is equal to 1 while extracting my table. This hyphen m will represent your number of mapper. So again, taking the previous example, 500 MB, guys. Okay, please always do this math part, because if this math is not clear, we cannot understand how many CPU we are going to use, how we are going to map this task with our CPU. So 500 MB data is there, so I know already 4 block. Number of block is 4, and we know this number of block is equal to number of input split by default, which is 4 again. This is a physical division, this is a logical division, and after input split there is a map task. So number of map task is equal to number of input split, which is 4, and this will go to how many CPU? Obviously 4 CPU. If I have available 4 CPU, if I do not have available 4 CPU, suppose if I have just available 2 CPU, then what will happen? It will submit sequentially, first to first 2 CPU, and then second cycle to CPU. So if my two task is taking, this two task is submitted in this 2 CPU, suppose this is taking 20-minute time to complete this, then how many time this 4 task will take? If 2 task is taking 20 minutes, then simple math, 20 into 2 is 40 minutes, and this 4 task is getting assigned in 4 CPU. So calculate this whenever this is required, how many CPU, how many task is going to be submitted in CPU. And in resource manager, we have seen multiple cases. If CPU is not available and your queue time crosses, if your queue time is over and your is still some tasks are pending, not yet submitted, what happened? Your entire job will be failed, because there is no availability of the CPU to process your data. Let's bring the first practical right here. With primary key for the table which does not have a primary key. So my query is as follows, guys. Scoop, and I want to do import, so I will write here import. This argument you will have to write like this only: scoop import. Suppose if you're doing export, you'll write here export. If you're doing import all tables, you'll write import all tables. If you're doing other argument, you'll write after this scoop only. Okay, since this is our first query, in a scoop practical, I'm using import basic command. Then I think till this part, yeah, yesterday I written, but I did not submit it. This is my IP address 168.41.1 slash. This is my database name, PRWA. This is my database name, space. This is my connection URL. Password you should not write, so we are encrypting this as a uh, better recommendation of scoop, because password you should not write it, obviously, right? Other anybody can see your data. Then from hyphen connect, let's break this whole part, okay, in multiple segment. So scoop import, this is my connection URL. This thing is my connection URL. First it will connect with this database, okay. This is MySQL database and this is the IP address which is communicating via. After this, what table I need, what table I want to extract. So here I will give another parameter as hyphen table, and hyphen table, I need to give a table name which is this ACC. So ACC, okay, hyphen table ACC. Then I don't want to write the target directory and I don't want to write the mapper, because again I will take you this part. What I have written here, can you please read this both note? By default, scoop uses number of mapper 4. If I do not write hyphen m is equal to any number, by default it will use 4 mapper and 0 reducer. Anyways, reducer is 0 because aggregation is not happening in scoop. It is for data extraction and transformation. Second point is, by default scoop uses target directory. It will keep this data. It will keep this data. Select the star from table name. It will keep this data in HDFS directory. That is what your objective is, final objective. So it will store this data in this directory /user/Cloudera. I'll show you the output once my data extraction is done. Now I do not define this two part and I submit this. Now this will throw me exception, guys. This will throw me exception and say that primary key is not available here. And being a developer or data engineer, you should know how to read the error. There are 4 acknowledgement I always refer. So code writing is one part which I say you can understand as gradually we start writing these things in our workspace. But reading this error and exception is way important than other thing. Otherwise, when we go to Scala, this is the programming language which we are going to learn. In Scala, we should know how to handle this exception. So always my priority is error first and exception second. If I'm unable to read this error, what can happen? Suppose your project is in BAU mode, business as usual. Okay. So when your project is in BAU mode and you are getting some error, because in BAU mode, developer is watching the project every day. Your team of development checks that how many total jobs submitted, how many running, how many pending, how many killed. And if you get any error, you should read this error that this error is coming due to data problem, that it is not giving you the right data according to your code. Second problem is from environment, and third problem is from code. Because if you're unable to identify this thing, then you cannot create an incident and you cannot allocate this incident to right team or right queue. Okay, so in order to follow the complete process, which is a roles and responsibility of everyday job, you should know this error. I feel mostly because this is what we do after completion of the project. Okay, once my project is live for many months, we keep reading this error. And the better part, Don't do this all things ad hoc basis. Whenever you're getting such error, please note all this error in one notebook. You have all notepad, let's say notepad plus plus, start reading, start loading this. So when I go and do the project part, okay, because I know you are going to use experience that I have this much year of experience in Hadoop. Now obviously if you're saying you have 2+ year of experience in Hadoop or 3+ year of experience in Hadoop, which means they can ask you multiple questions related to project, and if you're unable to answer, it's very clear that the practical enhancement is low. Okay, so these observations are required from the developer prospect. Now why this is giving me error, can we read this whole line? Import failed. I'll start from here. Import failed. No primary key could be found for table ACC. Please specify on with split by. This is advanced query of scope which will take some time later. But second part it says or. You can use a split by or perform a sequential import with -m1. What do we mean by this? It is saying currently this query is internally taking how many mapper? I'm keep revising this. How many mapper? 4 mapper by default. Okay, and we are saying that if table does not have a primary key, mapper cannot be multiple. Okay, since this is not able to map with the mapper immediately, it will fail and throw me exception. Now can I change this and define -m is equal to 1 at last? In this query, I have added this thing, -m is equal to 1. Now this will work, but what is your understanding? This will work, which means this data will go to process on how many CPU? This is just creating one task, right? This is just creating one task because this is less than 128 MB and does not have a primary key. Now there is one task, so this will submit in one CPU. But is this a parallel computing? Can you say this is a parallel computing? This is not a parallel computing, guys. This is a sequential operation. Like you have multiple CPU, but you are still saying that I want to work with a one CPU because problem is only one. This is missing. This PK primary key is missing. Let's do this query and check the output. Submit this. And I will say here, which password is required, by the way? Cloudera password or MySQL? Remember, this is again the common mistake. Password is from MySQL. Okay. If you check my above query, this query, here I'm saying username root and P, this password is from MySQL. It's asking. So write here a MySQL password. And password is MySQL is root in my case. Start reading this. Start reading the log file. Once this is over, I'll go top and read all the log file. So how many rows we have quickly? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows are there. So 7 records should retrieve, and I should get that acknowledgement in my scoop query. Once this is done, your mapper reducer is started. Can you see it? 0%, 0%. And 7 records retrieved. But let's read the log file from top. I submit this query. The moment I submit this query, can you relate this thing with this approach that you have a client, right? You have a client, and this client is having one table which is ACC. And what is the table size? This table size is somewhere on 150 bytes, 150 KB. Okay, I'm just taking one random number because the size is not bigger, that's why it is in KB. Now client is submitting this command which I have highlighted. Then where this query will go first, and in parallel to this, obviously I have RDBMS, right? In parallel to this, sorry, I have HDFS. In parallel to this, I have HDFS. And we know this in HDFS, we have multiple machine available. Suppose I'm working with the uh, 4 slave node cluster. So I have total 4 slaves machine available. Slave 1, slave 2, slave 3, slave 4. I have this many slaves available. And we know inside the slave, how many services are running? Data node and task taker, DN1 and node manager. Task taker we used to call in Hadoop 1.x. Node manager 1, data node 2, node manager 2, data node 3, node manager 3, data node 4, node manager 4. Okay. And I have one CPU available in all the slave and some 500 GB of hard disk and 4 GB of RAM. The moment I submit this query from client to extract this data and store this data into HDFS, where immediately this query is going? This query goes and communicate. One second. This query goes and communicate. I'm telling you currently how to read the log file. Okay, this is the system generated log file. 2 log file will be there. I'll read both for you. One is a system generated log file and second is a user log file. Since this is the first query, that's why we will go with all the insights. This is the resource manager. Can you see it? Client is connecting. Client.rm resource manager proxy. There is a protocol. This client is connecting to your resource manager with the port number 8032. And this port number is from what? This port number is from resource manager, right? So this client will go and submit this query to resource manager. Now resource manager job is to extract this data based on the number of mapper defined, and client has written number of mapper. How much? Client has written number of mapper. Or can I write the whole query here? Just to make things more clear, let me write it. Scoop import hyphen connect. Then I have JDBC, MySQL, IP address, which is 192.168.41.1 slash database name, hyphen username. And this username is root, hyphen P, password, and hyphen table name, which is ACC, and number of mapper is equal to 1. This is what is my query. Now, how many number of mapper we have given? 4. We given 1. Now, resource manager will submit this to one node manager because node manager is processing task based on the available CPU. There are one CPU available, one CPU available, one CPU available. If you're working with the cloud, this is a 1 vCPU, virtual core processing unit. This is one CPU. This is also one CPU. So total I have 4 CPU. But since my table does not have a primary key, I define my number of mapper 1. This resource manager will submit now this whole task to one node manager. this will submit to one node manager, but resource manager will find out where to write that data. Resource manager is knowing he's a master of node manager, but who is a master of data node? Master of data node is a node manager. I'm sorry, name node. Node manager is slave, resource manager is a master, data node is a slave, and name node is a master. So data node is communicating to name node, and node manager is communicating to resource manager. This is how the communication happens. We have seen in HDFS communication part. So resource manager will check from name node that where I can write this data, where I can write this ACC data, which has total 7 rows. Name node will say, okay, let me check which one is near and process. So name node will provide this data locality to resource manager. We know why we are using name node for data locality purpose. Now, once they submit, this process will start internal process of MapReduce, which is this from input to output. All this process will happen within MapReduce, within your node manager. And once data is extracted, okay, once data is extracted, so currently I'm here. I get the data from name node and now I am submitting this. After submission of this, can we read the next line? Next line is saying, this is some exception, interpret exception from DFS client, but exception is okay. I can avoid for now because exception is not abrupting my job. My job is running continuously. Uh, error can immediately abrupt my job. Okay, so error is more important. Priority wise, error is first and exception is second. Once this is done and gets the CPU, this is the number of split, which is 1. Number of split 1, which means how many map task? What is written here? 1 map task. And if one map task is there, so it will immediately submit a job. When this job will be created? When a resource manager accept this. When your resource manager accept this and put that into your application master for tracking purpose. I repeat, when client is submitting this whole query, resource manager is finding this many CPU are required and provided by user, which is 1. So this query will be submitted to one node manager for processing purpose. But how many job and how can I track that job? That job can be tracked from application master. Application master. This is what we have seen the difference between 1.x and 2.x. In 1.x, we have job tracker who is doing everything. Let me rewrite again. This job tracker is doing 3 tasks, and this job tracker is present in Hadoop first generation. What this is doing? They do job submission. Then second, they track the status of job. Then third, they manage the history also of your job. Only one guy is doing this whole task. Three different work, only one service is doing. In 2.x, for all these 3 things, I have an individual services. Resource manager is only looking for job submission part. Resource manager is saying, I will take care of this part. So when you submit a job, it will go to resource manager, and this is the port number 8032. We have seen there in query in log file. Then second, track a status. Track the status of job. Who will do? Application master. And please remember the port number. Application master. This application master is 8088. One second. This is 8088. Let me write here. And it is doing your track job status. Third, I will come. Third, I'll come in while. What is the job history? Okay. So once this job is done, it is submitting on application master. You can see it here, yarn client, and then submitted application. This is the application name. It has the same name as job, and just it is submitting to application master. That's why the name they are changing from job to application. This is submitted by source manager. This is accepted by application master. Now, can I track this? Actually, whatever you're submitting, you can track from this URL. Whatever you have submitted, you can track from this URL. I'll copy this URL. Okay, this can take a little extra time if your system is not having sufficient RAM. Okay, I'll copy this address and go to my browser. And here I will paste that. So I'm pasting this query. Okay, I just copied this query. I've copied this query. Excuse me, and I'm submitting this to my browser. And this is my browser. Okay, what 8088, and can you see the port number now? This port number is from 19888. This port number is from node manager. I think I every day repeat this things, port number for every services. Remember this point since they're important and we should be in a same page. I always mention that whenever we have a session. Okay. Now MapReduce job is this. It's submitted to your Cloudera user. Root Cloudera succeeded. Overrized is not required because we do not have multiple node cluster. So this is false. We have single node cluster. Submitted when this is submitted. This submitted based on this time. Currently this time is 8:23 p.m. Okay. So based on this, it submitted 20:09:53. The job is started. Can you see there is small time gap, but this is a PDT. Okay, PDT is one time zone, just like IST, GMT, BST we have. This submitted on 29:53, but my job is started. There's a small catch, guys. Okay, you'll have to remember this end. When you submitted 29:53 and this started actually in 10:18. So can we differentiate the time between this to start submitted and started? If I check the time difference, I find 7 and plus 18 is 25 second. Okay, I'll let me explain this in fair language. तो इसको 25 सेकंड लग रहा है सबमिट होने में, इसको 25 सेकंड लग रहा है स्टार्ट होने में. Why this is taking time 25 second? I'm just doing difference between submitted and started. Okay, because CPU is not immediately accepting this. CPU is taking 25 second to submit this. This is the time. Okay, now if I know this reason why this is taking, I can still read the log file and I will do that. This time finished job is 10:34. So let's write in English. 25 second it is taking to start the job by CPU obviously, and 18 plus 34, this is roughly 16 second. This query takes 16 second query takes to complete. Query takes to complete. So this is taking 16 seconds of time to complete the job, and this is there already by default calculated average map time. So one map task is there, and can I track this? I can track this. One map task is there, which node it is running, and how many reducer are there? There are 4 reducer. So map is equal to 1. Why this is there, guys? Because in my query I have explicitly written this m is equal to 1. And why I have written m is equal to 1? You know that I have written m is equal to 1 because I do not have primary key. So far this observation, and now I'll click on this map. Click on this map. This is the task which is created. This is the state telling me succeeded, start time, in time, 13 second elapsed time, 13 second elapsed time means CPU time, okay, to process this cumulative job. And I can see this start time is exactly 10:21 and the completion is 34. You want to read the further log file, you can click on this inside. And there is a log column. Okay, there's a column, log column. Let me click on this log column. When I click on this log column, I can see this log file, and this is the minor log file, and this is the system information. Can you check it? What is written here? This log type is a system log. It is known as a sys log. Another log is there which is a user log. Okay. So since I'm running out of time, I will pause this analysis right here, and tomorrow we will continue from this part. So for that, I will store this application number somewhere to track this. So let me store this application, copy this, open another terminal, go to my desktop. Please remind if I forget where is this. Okay, so I'm storing this in desktop with a name, cat application track store, and paste it here. Enter Control D. So we'll start from this application track tomorrow. How can we read the log file? I have done my observation 40% so far, but still we have not yet completed this many analysis. So I'm doing for one job. Since this is first, you should know every point, but when you run this in your cluster in your system, please read by yourself. If you're unable to read any log file, any information, definitely we can connect and discuss on this.